When we're all faced with life and death questions and you're on the precipice of death at any moment, I think you're going to ask life's biggest questions. Fear on top of fear creates chaos, and before you know it, people are responding to that in ways that are dangerous. There's looting. The stores are running out of food. And I know if the world ended tomorrow, I'm going to have an influx of people coming through my property, either asking for my stuff or trying to take away my stuff. So you can only allow so many people into the property, right? Before the resources are going to run thin, and you're going to be in situations where you have crazy people banging on your door, begging to come in. Taking care of your community and people around you is easy when resources are unlimited, when the grocery store is open. What happens when your neighbor that you know and you love is knocking on your door begging for food? Humans are a resource. The more people you have, trusted people, the chances of survival go up.
World War III is already happening.
This is a house of cards, and it is in the process of collapsing right now.
You're going to see an economic crash, the likes of which we've never seen.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Today on the channel we have Ben Smallbone, who is the director of the film Homestead. It is a movie that was just released, still in theaters, and I recently watched it and I really enjoyed it. It's about a post-apocalyptic world in which survivors have to kind of coalesce on this homestead, and they try to ride it out. They don't know what's going on the outside, and there's lots of social dynamics that arise, and I find that it is probably one of the more credible plots as far as post-apocalyptic fiction goes. So I would certainly encourage people after today's video to go and check it out if possible. And Ben, thanks for coming out, man, and congrats on the success of your movie.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. I've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks talking about the film, and looking forward to talking to Canadians about it as well.
Well, I noticed in watching the film that I'm like, there's a lot of familiar stuff in this film. Like I'm seeing a lot of like familiar gear. And did you happen to come across my channel before making the film by chance?
Well, I don't know if I was familiar as much with your show as I was with the prepper world. I've obviously, in diving deep into this story, had to research, what gear would people use. We had a lot of people very excited about being part of the show and the movie, and showing off their gear in a kind of end times post-apocalyptic world. And then me, myself, I live on 7 acres just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and always kind of played that mind game of, hey, if the world ends tomorrow, what am I going to do? What's the plan? And obviously through this film, have started to take that planning a lot more serious, because it is very realistic. It's set, a bomb goes off in Los Angeles. I'm not giving anything away that the trailer doesn't. And it creates mass chaos throughout the United States, and then that spreads across the world. And these people who are prepared at a homestead invite, a few of their friends along with some ex-special forces soldiers to protect the homestead. And that's kind of where the chaos starts to ensue. You've got the peace-loving homesteaders with the more violent, guns, ammunition is the only way we're going to survive this thing. And they collide on the homestead, and people realize that some of the people inside the gates are just as dangerous as the ones outside. So that's kind of the conflict that sets up the story and the series.
It is a very realistic scenario that's depicted, and I think what people can potentially benefit from this film is that you're going to watch it, and there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to say to yourself, man, I didn't think about that. Like there's going to be so many situations, like the social dynamics and how something would truly play out. A lot of people, they'll get their homestead, they'll get their preps from CanadianPreparedness.com, and they'll think, okay, I'm good to go. I'm ready. But like we really are relying on directors like yourself to kind of show us what that world would be like, because in Western society, it's such a unique set of circumstances that we've never truly been tested as a society like that, And so we almost really have to imagine, but keeping our imagination kind of contained to the realm of what's realistic is not always easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think stepping into the world of the homestead, we wanted it to be realistic. We didn't want it to be artificial. We didn't want zombies. We didn't want it to be, post-apocalyptic and people's clothes disappearing and being raptured to heaven. That was not the desired goal here at all. We want it to be something that people relate to, and a lot of the writers that were a part of this have experienced a lot in third world countries where this kind of living is daily. Guys, they are living the apocalypse in a lot of these places, and I've spent a lot of time in third world countries as well. And so I think there was an element of like taking things that we had experienced in these countries and incorporating them into a survival a storyline, but also the social aspect of it. Loving your neighbor and taking care of your community and people around you is easy when resources are unlimited, when the grocery store is open, when you've got unlimited gas at your gas station. But when you take all that away, what happens? What happens when your neighbor that you know and you love is knocking on your door begging for food? What happens when somebody that you met at church or you worked alongside of at a homeless shelter is coming to your gate saying that their family's starving or their dog just got shot by, a gang roaming around through the subdivision? What do you do in those scenarios? And we play that out in the film and in the series.
Was there any motivation for you to become a homesteader or to make this film in particular? Like, what was the driving force behind this endeavor?
I grew up on a farm. In fact, I'm originally from Australia, and I was born in Sydney and moved to the States in the 90s, got into some minor trouble in my teen years, and my parents actually sent me back to a ranch, a 60,000 acre ranch in the middle of the nowhere, Australia, and spent my 18th birthday, was there for 2.5 months, building fences, working the land. And what was amazing to me is, in a Western civilization, and Australia is mostly Western, right? But these people, not so much. If the world ended tomorrow, nothing would change for them.
Yeah.
They still are living life just as joyfully, just as normal as if nothing ever happened. They would still have access to food. Everything that they raised, they ate. If the world ended tomorrow, they're going to be fine. They had solar power. They had shortwave radio, so they communicate to their neighbors miles away. Literally, their closest neighbor was 6.5 miles away, or like 12 kilometers. They had, they had gasoline, petrol stored for months. So I learned a lot, through that. And then here in the States, I have a 7-acre farm. I've got goats and chickens. They all have names. So, if the world ended, we'd have to figure out which one we would kill first. But we've played that scenario. And in 2020, when COVID hit, guys, it got really bad, even here in Tennessee for a minute. Grocery stores started running out of food. Gas station prices were going up incredibly. A gas station literally just down the road from me ran out of gas. And things were like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And I have 6 siblings. And we all called each other and said, hey guys, what are we going to do if this all goes to hell? And the plan was, my parents have 40 acres. We're going to escape to their 40 acres and hole up and build a community together. And in that, we would invite close family and friends that might be specialized in certain things, guys that know weaponry, guys that know animal husbandry, raising animals, plants, so that we could figure out how to survive. And that is very similar to the story of Homestead. And so when I got asked to be a part of the Homestead team and the creative team and telling this story, I was stoked because I've kind of played the imaginary games in my mind of what this would look like. And now I got to actually bring it to life visually in a story and a series.
I think the difficult thing to depict in movies like yours is the Western mindset, which is one that's only known abundance. It's only ever known entitlement. And you give the characters a pretty good start in that if there was ever a place to be, it would be this place. But even in that environment, people who come from different walks of life, some have more entitled mentality than others, and just seeing them kind of coalesce on this point and watching the social dynamics play out is just an interesting mental exercise for people to try to put themselves in that situation. And so when you're developing these, like, what are you using to inform the setting and the characters? Are you consulting with a lot of experts to make a film like this?
Yes, there's a gentleman named Jason Orvis who actually wrote the book series that the movie's based on. It's called Black Autumn,
Right.
and he's a wealthy gentleman. He's actually involved in Black Rifle Coffee. There's quite a
Yep.
few people on the production that are being involved at Black Rifle Coffee, and the Homestead is a real place. What you see in the movie and in the series exists just outside of Salt Lake City. It's a 300, 400 acre homestead property just set in the foothills of the mountains, just right outside the city, with national thousands and thousands of acres of national forest land backing up to that. So theoretically, his property in an end time situation is hundreds of thousands of acres
So
of
he's going to
land.
have to move now.
Yeah, yeah. And he's got the solar fields, and he's got the ATVs and thousands of gallons of gasoline and food supply. And so he is the consultant. And he is ready. And guys, when I can't say it enough. If the world ends, that's the place you want to be. But
Don't
it's
go
not
there
going to
because you
be.
might get shot.
And that's true too. He's got 1 million rounds of ammunition. He has every
Right.
variation of guns on the property. I hope
Yeah.
he doesn't mind me saying this. He's got a tank, Nate. I
Wow.
mean, this guy is ready.
Mhm.
And I think the stories that he's really struggled with is, what do you do? You can only allow so many people into the property, right? Before the resources are going to run thin, and you're going to be in situations where you have, crazy people banging on your door, begging to come in. And so he wrote this book series and the movie out of the thought of what am I going to do in a situation like this, and who do I bring in? And obviously, with that amount of resources, there's going to be a lot of people um, coming to join or take it away from him. And what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, well, again, I don't want to spoil it, but there's an ending which I think is unexpected. I like that they show the value of people in the movie. And that's an important thing that needs to be expressed more in films because I think oftentimes everybody's an enemy in these movies and everybody's seen as a drag on resources and, a burden on a community. But the film takes a slightly different approach. But of course, there's conflicting opinions. So one of the characters is, and I guess you'd call him the protagonist. I don't really know if he's a protagonist yet, but the ex-Green Beret, Jeff Erickson. So did his military background, did that kind of help inform his character quite a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jeff Erickson is a character in the film played by Bailey Chase. Bailey Chase has played military specialists in projects going back decades. But he's playing a real life character named Jeff Kirkham, who wrote the book series with Jason Orvis, and they were very instrumental in every part of the project. What the guns they're using, how they're shooting the guns, when do they shoot, when do they not shoot, what are they wearing from day to day, and there was a lot of effort and time put into trying to make that as realistic as possible to make sure that it was in line with ex Green Beret military special force soldiers that would be in a situation like this where they're hired to come in and protect a home, or in this situation, the homestead. And what would that look like? And he's fresh out of the military. He's struggling with some PTSD, and so some of that starts to come out as we get further and further into the series. And
Mhm.
when you're thrown into an end time situation like that, where every decision is life and death, just like it is on the battlefield, but now you've got your family there with you. You've got your wife, you've got your kids there next to you. It creates a different kind of warrior. And we explore that through the Jeff Erickson character.
So are you like writing all these scenes yourself, or is there like a team of people who's kind of helping you? This guy who owns the property, is he somebody who's really helping forming how things
Oh
get
yeah.
set up, how things unfold?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jason owns the Homestead, wrote the book series, is the show one of the showrunners of the film and the series. Yeah, he's very instrumental in every scene. He's giving input on the homesteading aspect of it, and then also the military aspect of it. He's not ex-military like Jeff Kirkham is, but he's being trained by all the guys and understands a lot what goes through their mind, and really has dove into what makes those guys who they are. And he is in every battle sequence or action sequence. He is there and very instrumentally involved. We also have a stunt team that comes in a lot of the big action sequences on the series and on the movie. Which, by the way, Nate, we got to get you the series so you can watch that as well. Because uh, in my mind, it's better than the movie, and love what we did with it, both artistically, and then story wise. There's a lot more action, there's a lot more intensity. You know the characters now, so we're not like spending 2 hours getting to know the characters. We're now in their world fully and able to really kind of take you on their journey of what they're struggling with. But yes, we have a lot of people that are speaking into making sure that all the elements from the homesteading survival piece to the military special force soldiers are as realistic as possible.
Just so people know, some people watching this are not aware because we've yet to inform them that this is actually a series now, as well as you just said. So,
Yeah, so when the movie ends, there's a QR code that comes up, and you scan the QR code, and it takes you to the Angel Studios streaming platform where you can watch the next two episodes of the series. And then the hope is we're going to be rolling out more episodes in the next few months as well.
nice. And I think for a story like this, where it really leaves a lot of things unanswered, obviously, at the end of the first movie. So there's plenty of ways the story could go, likely for several seasons, I imagine, depending on how the magnitude of whatever calamity has unfolded. And I'm sure as the series goes on, you'll start to expose more about what exactly that was and where it emerged from. Can you maybe talk a little bit about why the decision was made to use a nuke at the beginning?
Well, it's a dirty nuke. It's smuggled on a boat across the Pacific Ocean by Filipino terrorists, and they're trying to take out LA. And it's pretty tough right now because the first 10 minutes of the film look eerily similar to a lot of video and photos that I've been seeing of LA with the fires that they're actually currently fighting. And
Yeah.
so it's been hard to even promote it to some of the
Yeah.
LA folks because
Yeah.
it's a little close to home, obviously. But the idea is they're trying to attack the port of Los Angeles, and they're coming to shore, and the National Guard um, detects radiation from their boat, and there's helicopters circling, and they actually in the book series they blow up the nuke before they get to land, and end up not killing that many people, but the chaos that ensues is what kills a lot of people.
Right.
The fallout, the radiation, the fear of radiation. You know, whether people are actually experiencing radiation or not, the fear of it drives the masses crazy. People don't know what happened. You know, social media, the internet is still active, and people are, you know, spreading stories. And then the Russians get involved. There's a cyber attack. They bring down the internet. They stop messing with the stock exchange, which creates even more panic. And then before you know it, people think that they're under attack, that there's a Russian invasion, and then that's what creates the chaos that brings these people to flee to the mountains to survive together in the homestead. The bomb, specifically, I don't know exactly why. I should have asked that question, Nate.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I should have asked exactly why, specifically a nuclear bomb. But that is
Well,
being in the book
it's very
series.
plausible in light of a lot of the recent events with drones on the East Coast. I mean, it's something that is often underestimated. Immediately, we want to jump to, okay, it's going to be a war between nation states. But, you know, you picked a one-off kind of country terrorists from a country that nobody would have ever expected, and I'm not sure if that was deliberate. But what was the motivation for that, if you don't mind me asking? Like, why Filipino terrorists? Or is that something we're going to find out later on?
We actually don't have plans to dive into exactly why. I think the writers felt like being Muslim terrorists was a little expected and on the nose.
Yeah.
And so what a lot of people don't know is there is actual Filipino terrorists that hate the United States because of a little known war that happened there 70 years ago in the Philippines that the United States was very supportive of. And it created a culture of terrorism, specifically targeting Americans. And there's been multiple Americans killed in the Philippines and the surrounding islands by those Filipino terrorists. So it's a real thing. I think, it was just wanting to surprise the audience with, wait, Filipinos attacking the United States of America? Obviously, we're great friends with the Philippines, but there is terrorists on the outlying islands of the Philippines.
Yeah, one of the things that is interesting about it, like you say, as a prepper, I can relate to this because having, paying close attention to current events and having seen many disasters unfold, and typically it is the fear of the disaster itself. COVID's kind of a great example of that, where the disease, killed a few people, right? A lot of people, I guess. But arguably the reaction was worse in many respects. And that's a subject of debate, but I think the principle holds true in that as a prepper, I'm looking at what are people's reactions going to be. I'm preparing for the panic. And now that we're entering the age of artificial intelligence, there can be a lot of misinformation. And a good friend of mine who's a big time prepper, he's always told me that the thing that I fear the most is not that the internet will shut down, but that there'll still be an internet and we'll be in a post-disaster world because of the misinformation aspect.
Absolutely. Fear, we can talk about nuclear weapons. We can talk about, crashing planes into the Twin Towers. Those kind of attacks are incredibly disrupting and devastating. But fear is the strongest form of terrorism. And I think if you look at the fear that came out of any of these kind of attacks in any country, the fear is actually probably caused just as many deaths as the original inciting incident did. And the series unpacks that heavily. This fear within the homestead of, what's going on outside. Obviously the internet's down, the news, there's no news. They're relying on some shortwave radio broadcasts that come in fairly frequently. But even the news that he's getting, that's coming through the shortwave radio, he doesn't even know what's accurate. And so fear on top of fear creates chaos. And before you know it, people are responding to that in ways that are dangerous. There's looting. Stores are running out of food. Gas stations run out of gas within 72 hours. All because people think that the country's under attack from a singular nuclear weapon. And then that fear ripples across the United States of America. And then, Russia sees that as an opportunity to make a cyber attack that then makes the world think that the Russians are a part of this attack and that the Russians come into war in the United States. And then slowly civilization as we know it collapses. And so, yes, the fear is the worst kind of terrorism, and that continues throughout the series. And people don't know what they don't know, and they choose to believe things that aren't necessarily true and respond to that like it is true. And that's really present in multiple scenes in the movie and in the series as well.
Do you think that the movie depicts preppers in an accurate light? How do you think it's going to change the perceptions of, being a prepper yourself, obviously you're not out to try to stigmatize the community at all, obviously, but do you think that this is going to, and is it your hope, I guess, that people are going to walk away from this and say, hey, maybe I should, consider some of this stuff as being a part of my lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to do art that just solely entertains. I want to do art that makes people question things. I want art that, moves people, brings people to hope, but also makes them ask life's darkest questions. What if this was real? What if a scenario like this did happen? Am I prepared? Honestly, I'm not as prepared as I'd like to be. And making this has helped me start to take it more seriously. Look, I've had preppers reach out to me about the project that are upset about it,
Yeah.
that don't think it's an accurate reflection, and then I've had other preppers that are like, "Hey, thank you for making this because this is really, really, really important." And then I've had other preppers that wish that it was more, that we talked about it more in the film, and that there was less, you know, um, people talking and there was more prepping and there was more showing the resources and showing the million rounds of ammunitions and
Right,
all of
right.
the things that are actually exist at the homestead in real life. So I can't answer that exactly whether it's helpful or hurtful. My hope is that it's helpful. Just having any conversation about these things is helpful. I will say this, this is the dream prepper facility, and I don't think many people could afford what we portray in the homestead. Just the property, just the house itself, and the surrounding buildings is 60,000 square feet. It's a huge facility. The solar fields and the battery backup systems and the water pump systems. It's a dream homesteading facility, and I think if everybody's acquiring that, nobody would ever even start getting something because it would be incredibly difficult. But I think taking small steps to prepare ourselves for what I believe is inevitable, whether it's in our lifetime or not. You look at any civilized nation since the beginning of time; they go in these 300-year cycles of success and building out a civilized society, and then collapse, and then rebuild. And so, at some point, the United States of America, wherever we want to admit it or not, and most likely Canada is going to be pulled with it, North America itself. It seems like it's inevitable that there's going to be some small, large, I don't know, but collapse. And we're going to be wishing that we were more prepared. And I think this film hopefully shows that and prepares people and at least allows them to have a conversation about what would it look like if something like this happened to us.
While it might be somewhat alienating for people in the sense that, yeah, there's a lot of people that are never going to be able to afford all of that stuff, right? At the same time, that's not without its own unique set of risks that many people won't have to worry about. They're going to have to worry about hundreds of people banging on their door asking for stuff, government expropriation, and all the rest. So if you're under the radar and you're perhaps not as wealthy, there's some advantages to that. And I think that is perhaps a subtext in the film there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had a few preppers reach out and be like, "Hey, all of your shots of the homestead look beautiful, but I can see numerous houses in the valley below. If this guy was really a prepper, he would have built that homestead, 100 miles further up into the
Yeah.
mountains, right? So that people aren't coming and knocking on the door. Like the guy should have expected this. Well, obviously he
Yeah.
did. He built a 12-foot high fence. He had a million rounds of ammunition. He wanted to be able to live in a house in proximity to the luxuries of modern civilization and still be prepared for the end. And I think you can have both. Look, if I was to prepare the ultimate homestead, I would want to be in the middle of the nowhere, Montana or Wyoming, as far away from any city as I could be with my resources. But I don't think that that's always the right thing for everybody.
Yeah.
And here I say that while I live, 20 minutes outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And I know if the world ended tomorrow, I'm going to have an influx of people coming through my property, either asking for my stuff or trying to take away my stuff. So, but I do think it's different for different people. In this story, his proximity to the town and the city is a big part of the storyline.
Yeah, no, and there's pros and cons to everything, you know. I mean, there's so many different philosophies with respect to this, and sometimes eventually we're all going to have to congregate into communities. So if you have a high rank in a community like that from the get-go, you know, it arguably could be a better position. But what were some of the other criticisms that some preppers might have had of the film, like in terms of the accuracy, that they've thought that certain things were not depicted?
Oh man, yeah, where do I start? Uh, I am I am notorious for reading the 1,000 bad reviews over the five good ones. And they will haunt me and keep me awake up at night a lot longer than the positives will make me celebrate and high five. So you know, man, we have gasoline diesel vehicles driving all over the property throughout the movie and series, and we never acknowledge where the gasoline is stored or show it. You
Mm,
know, that's a constant one.
right.
You know, people are frustrated that the family's living in the beautiful, you know, 60,000 square foot home and not letting the community and the people that have invited to the property in the home. That
Yeah.
becomes a story of haves and have nots later in the series, and we explore why they don't allow people into the house.
And
While
really,
the majority of the people,
that's not something to be upset about, because you know we can make value judgments about the characters, but that's not necessarily a flaw in how you know, the movie was directed. You know,
yeah, I think they think because we didn't explain it that it was a mistake, but that is a
right?
story piece that is yet to come. You mentioned
Mm,
earlier the haves and the have-nots. That becomes a big thing because
yeah,
all these people that are living on the property in tents and the cabin are, you know, seeing the beautiful mansion in the distance that six people are inside of.
right.
And they're going, you know, why not let us in there? Winter's coming. It's getting cold. You know, let us into the house. You know, the end of the film. I don't think I'm giving away anything here, Nate. If I am, cut it out.
Okay.
Um, they build a greenhouse, and it's a steel structured, fancy greenhouse. And you know, a lot of preppers wish that we'd had more of like a home built
It's the
version of
same.
that.
Just a slight spoiler for people. It's the same greenhouse type of greenhouse I have, which is why I'm looking at this movie and I'm like, hey, I recognize that radio. I recognize that bug out bag and that Nutri-Store and that gold backs and, you know, all that stuff. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, well, the in our minds, again, unexplained in the film. You know, you just kind of hope that people can answer some of these questions on their own.
Yeah.
But the questions, or the answers that they're coming up with, aren't in line with ours. The idea is that he has multiple greenhouses on the property that aren't built yet, just for this situation.
Okay.
And so, you know, when they start running out of food, they can stop building these greenhouses. And so
Right.
that scenario has come into to question a lot.
Well,
Homestead is
I did notice when I first watched it, I'm like, that's a big house and a pretty small greenhouse. But now that you explained that, that makes sense.
well, and there is multiple other greenhouses that you will see in a lot of the shots, but we don't
Okay.
talk about them specifically. That
Mm.
greenhouse at the end of the film is specifically for the potatoes that they're growing for the community. Another question that we've gotten over and over again, which surprised me, is that we have scenes in the film of the homesteaders picking peaches and apples at the same time, and that was like people were really frustrated that we shut off both. But I swear to you, there was peaches on the trees. They weren't good looking peaches. They
Yeah.
were pretty eaten over and nasty leftovers.
Okay.
At the same time that we're picking apples.
Right.
But people were really upset that we kind of fictionalized and stretched the truth there a little bit. But yeah, there's a lot of nitpicky things, you know, like that. And then big inciting incident, the wheat bins get broken into by wood rats, and the amount of damage that we show in that shot is not enough to throw the homestead into turmoil, giving away
Right.
a plot storyline here. But some of those things that have been
Yeah.
questioned nonstop, and I love it, honestly. it's going to help us going forward on the series to keep this thing as accurate as we can, knowing that people are really watching that closely.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you're not going to be able to. You have to balance kind of the dramatic elements with the realism. Otherwise, it's boring, you know. So, is that a problem that you find trying to manage those things? It's like, you know, you could make a video game and it could be super realistic. You know, you could go and work a 9 to 5 job and have to pay bills, and but like, who would want to play that game, right? So there has to be some dramatic elements and sensationalized elements to it, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted to show a lot more of the outside world falling apart, but it was very important to the writers that once we're in the homestead, we're seeing the world solely from their perspective. So, you know, as we get into the series, you see smoke off in the distance, but they don't know what that smoke's necessarily from, but they just keep seeing more and more smoke, people burning fires and buildings burning in the distance. But we never actually go down there and find out what it is. And so to me, that was a frustrating thing for me as a creative and a storyteller that wants to show off big visuals and exciting elements of like what's going on in the world. But it was really important for the writers to keep us the POV of the homesteaders and what they're experiencing within the homestead. So yeah, there's definitely been a few times along the way where I've pushed creatively on something and being restrained because we need to tell a realistic story as much as possible.
Well, I personally think, you know, having seen a lot of these movies, and I've seen every single possible movie you can imagine along these lines, is that this one, you know, it starts off in a very glamorous setting where, like we said, it's going to be unobtainable for a lot of people. But I think that allows for it to become like progressively grittier because they start off essentially in heaven, right? I mean, they start off in a place where, you know, it's ideal, and then things can kind of gradually fall apart, and it really starts to get you to, especially a person like myself who's made 2,500 videos on this stuff, brainstorming it from every possible angle. You know, if there's something, if there's something that a movie can show me that I've never thought of before, I'm pretty impressed. And I would say that this one definitely does that in a lot of ways. You know, even like the national park. I'm not sure if we want to spoil this, but there is a national park that the property borders, right? And you know, you don't often think, you think, well, I'm just going to butt up against a national park and everything's going to be great, you know. But there are potentially hazards there because that is public land. So the legalities of, you know, do you allow people, do you run the risk of doing things extrajudiciously and then perhaps have to deal with the legal recourse thereafter? So questions like this, and then the government getting involved, and you know, these are all things that are not well depicted in a lot of series like this. So I think you guys did a great job.
Thank you. And taking what you just said a step further about the legalities of the property surrounding it or not legalities. Like to me, the military specialists that are on the property, like nobody's coming after us if we go onto that property and do what we want to do. Nobody's going to care. And so it's like, you know, you got these people that are wanting to still follow the law
Mm-hmm.
in a world where law is no longer present. And so it's like, in a situation like that, what do you do? Well, these guys just want to survive. And so in times like that, I think it's going to be really hard to decide when do we break the law for the sake of survival and when do we follow the law, knowing that the law is not coming if we break it either way. And so a really interesting dynamic that we dive in, and that's a big storyline in the series as we go forward too.
One of the most challenging things in that situation where there is a fog of SHTF, you don't know what's going on outside. You know, you don't know if FEMA is coming in a few weeks. So you don't know if what you do now is going to have some major repercussions. And if you have to make that call, like one of the scenes I thought was really good was when, you know, you have the the poor people, and the guy on the homestead, who's like the landowner, the rich landowner, is he's torn between, well, what if FEMA comes and I've turned these people away for a few weeks? How are they going to look at me afterwards? They're going to forever kind of look at you in a different way. Some people will be okay with that, others won't.
Yeah, and the specific story you're talking about, it's not just a neighbor. It's a friend.
Mm.
This is a friend that they go to church together. They live in the same community. Their kids play together. They've fed the homeless together. It's not just somebody that they're acquaintance with that they've seen down the street, which I think would be easy to turn away. No, this is a dear friend that he's seeing on the other side of his gate, starving, running out of food, constant danger surrounding them. And yeah, what do you do in that situation where you think, and it's acknowledged in the film, that help is coming. Help is on the way. We literally talk about it multiple times and they think help's coming. Well, what if that help comes and you've treated all these people um, poorly? They're going to remember that when
Yeah.
when the world comes back together. Going back to what you said earlier about preppers poking holes, I thought that was one of the things too. Is like, hey, this guy is like ultra prepped out, ready for the end of the world, but at the same time, is going, FEMA's going to be here soon. FEMA's going to be here soon.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
why would he care so much about prepping if
Yeah.
he's constantly relying on FEMA showing up?
Sure.
Um,
It's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. He has to be a little naive, right, in order to create that tension with the security detail. So,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely. So that's a little bit about Hollywood.
One of the great things I liked about the movie, though, is oftentimes we as preppers, we're very isolationist and we want to just kind of go it alone. And, there's a lone wolf mentality or a lone nuclear family mentality. But oftentimes we underestimate the value that people actually bring in terms of their potential skill sets, just having another body around, another set of eyes on things. And so I like the fact that this movie tries to show it from a different light where it's not just, selfish hoarding, and me against the world, but it's also there's a value in people that's very pragmatic, not just hippy dippy, but there's an actual human resource, even if you're looking at it strictly from an objectivist point of view. There is a benefit in making some provisions for potential people in your community that might be assets. They might have some specialized skill sets. And sometimes the skills that they possess might not seem very useful at the start, but, later on they become incredibly useful.
Yeah, I think that's a huge story point, and not just a story point. It's the real plan for this real homestead. Again, as I said earlier, the homestead that's portrayed in the film is a real place with the real owner. He's the writer on the series. He actually has a role in the episodes. If you look really closely, you'll see him show up. He's got some lines of dialogue. He's fantastic, actually. Um, and and his plan is, again, if the world ends, that there will be 100, and I think it's 50 people are invited to the homestead, and these aren't just family and friends.
That's Dunbar's
Yeah,
number.
some of them are. Um, they are doctors. Yeah, medics. They're special force soldiers that are coming with their weaponry and their training to protect the facility. They're gardeners, people that know how to raise plants and build nurseries. He has a legit therapist. He's got therapists on the list that is going to come. He's got a legitimate plan of people that will be invited to build the community that will survive the end of the world. And I think one thing that we often look over as preppers is humans are a resource. Doing this together, fighting whatever we have to fight together, planning and thinking and patrolling the property. The more people you have, trusted people that have gifts and abilities, I think the chances of survival go up. pretty dramatically. At least that's what we think based off some of the storylines that we've written and played around with in a fictional world. It seems like the more people, again, trusted people, people with abilities that you can surround yourself with to survive the end of the world and build a community, your chances of survival seem to go up instead of that lone man mentality. And gosh, who knows? Again, we're playing in fictional stories here that we've yet to live. And I think if in a scenario like that, we would learn very quickly. But based off what I've witnessed in even third world countries, I spent years and years doing documentaries in third world countries. The people that came together in these rural communities in moments of disaster where resources were limited survived longer than the people that went on it alone.
That is such a great point, because a specialized division of labor really is what brings like a synergistic sort of value to a community above and beyond just a jack of all trades trying to balance everything. And I guess as a prepper who has it all and might think, well, okay, I'm good to go. If a person was really concerned that things were going to take a turn for the worse, for myself and just having this conversation right now I'm thinking about, what can I do to prepare for those people who maybe not have had the foresight. You're never going to convince anybody to do this. They have to kind of come to it of their own free will. But it really expands and broadens the scope of one's preparedness goals if your goal is to provide for a much broader community of people, like you said, who have those skills. Because it's a completely different mentality in a lot of these societies, like you say, where it might be a bit more collectivist, and they have no choice but to come together, right? As opposed to just isolating and essentially withering out.
Yeah, I think it flies in the face of what I thought the prepping world was, and I think that's what's kind of unique about the movie is it is about building community, and it is about surviving together. And gosh, when I say together, is that just your family? I don't know exactly what that looks like. For my family, I got 7 brothers and sisters, so we have people that are gifted in all the different roles just within my family. And my instinct back in 2020, when we thought the world was going to hell, was it's just me and my family running to my parents' 40-acre farm, figuring out how to survive together. But in Homestead, it's a full-blown community of people beginning a whole new world together. And they have the blacksmiths, they have the doctors, they have the nurses, they have the gardeners, they have the chimney builders, they have the specialists in all the different roles, and then that way they're being able to plan for it too. And the resources at the homestead are again, million rounds of ammunition. They have food silos buried in the ground. I saw 6. And huge resources, so they could take care of a community of people that are all working together to survive.
Yeah, well, that's a great avenue for people to explore. And it also, of course, towards the end of the film, it takes a religious turn. And can you explain what the motivation is for including that in the film? I noticed that it didn't really start to present itself, like the kind of religious subtext didn't present itself till later on in the film, which is something as an agnostic empiricist, I appreciated that, but I also do appreciate the place for religion, and, I respect the values of Christianity and many of the world's religions. I mean, if you're truly living those values, then there's nothing to be criticized there, really. But how was this a motivation? And was this a motivation for you in the film personally, or was it just Angel Studios, or how did that?
Yeah, both. A lot of the writers behind the project are Christians. Angel Studios, they projects have to amplify light, have a message of hope, and that brings an element of faith into a lot of their projects. They don't select solely based off Christian projects. It's just their desire is projects that amplify light. But as a Christian, I looked at the moral foundation of rebuilding a community of people that are trying to survive together, and the elements of my faith that I think become incredibly important in a situation like that. But beyond that, I think that there's, when we're all faced with life and death questions, and you're on the precipice of death at any moment, whether that's from starvation or, people coming in and taking your stuff and killing you. I think you're going to ask life's biggest questions. And what really attracted me to this project, and not just elements of faith, but elements of faith as well, is like, is there an afterlife? If there is a God, where is God in all of this? Why are such bad things happening to such good people? And I got really excited about exploring those questions of faith with the backdrop of life and death in survival, and the element of hope that there is more purpose to something that's going on than just the evil terrorist attack. And is God in this and doing something in this? And we start to explore that a little bit more in the series. Hopefully this doesn't scare away some of you, but there's a little girl, adopted daughter of Jeff Erickson, the military specialist, that sees things beyond explanation. She gets premonitions and visions, and we kind of explore that through a faith element. Her family does not have faith, but she has faith and has a connection with God and sees what God is doing before anybody else does. And that gets really unpacked as we get further into the story.
No, like I say, I'm a person who is very scientifically minded, but I also respect the social value. A lot of my friends are Christian. About 90% of my viewers are Christian, so they're going to love that aspect of the film. And I found that it certainly is a strength of that community that they can have some sort of belief system. And it's undeniable that that's part of the reason why religion arose in the first place, is that, when you have all these like fiefdoms and feudal societies warring with one another, and you have people at the whim of their own desires and interests, in order to have some higher level of social and cultural attainment, you have to be able to believe in something greater than yourself, right? And if you have some social glue, some solidarity along religious lines, that's great, as long as it's not misused, because of course there can be the potential, and we see this depicted in a lot of film, perhaps unfairly, that oftentimes there's like fanaticism that unfolds, and before you know it, people are doing ritualistic sacrifice. So, this movie is showing it in a more positive light, which I think is probably quite realistic based on a lot of the people that I've worked with. And it would only get weird if you had some eccentric leader.
Yeah, and it's interesting. In the beginning stages of writing this, there was a lot of fear that the Homestead would come across cultish as we got further into the series. But here's the truth. The film's for everybody. What I love is you take a smorgasbord of people from different backgrounds, different religions, different politics, different belief systems, and you throw them in a survival situation on 350 acres in the mountains of Colorado, and they've got to survive together, and they've got to put aside the differences and celebrate the similarities and figure out, what do I believe, what don't I believe. And beginning of episode 2, there's an atheist therapist that shows up at the Homestead that has been invited to be there for the people that are struggling with some of the deepest, darkest issues of life, and she kind of unpacks things through her perspective as an atheist, and that collides with the Christian perspective of some of our other characters in the film, and allows us to have really great conversations. But I will say this: and I might get in trouble for saying this, but I've traveled the world, being to every state in the United States and 36 countries, and the countries that are founded on the foundation of the Bible and the Christian faith are always, in my experience, um, the most successful nations. They're the cleanest, they're the politest, the kindest people. There's purpose to these people's lives beyond this earth. And I have found that pretty consistently. And so I think there's a line at the end of the film that says, the end is just the beginning. And in a world where they're rebuilding a community and a world because the world has collapsed in Homestead, they're using the foundations of the Christian faith to rebuild a moral foundation to build this homestead on. And so I think that's kind of a really interesting way to experience it. But in saying that, not everybody's Christian at the homestead. Not everybody's an atheist. It's a collision of a bunch of different people, a bunch of different perspectives, and we explore that together throughout the movie and the series.
And I'm usually pretty critical when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I went into it not knowing what to expect, to be honest. But I was pleasantly surprised that, it's not like you're beating people over the head with it. I think you guys did a good job of balancing, obviously, the mandate of the studio and depicting a situation as it would realistically unfold.
Yeah, I think as long as I'm involved, I'm I'm going to make sure that it doesn't feel like we're beating you over the head with the Bible. To me, Christians oftentimes create art the way we wish the world was and not the way the world really is. And I don't want to do that. I want this to be as realistic and as authentic and relatable to as many people as possible. And if it gets to a point where people are feeling like, it's a Sunday school lesson, that doesn't work for me. And I am the biggest critic of faith-based Christian content that probably exists here in Nashville, Tennessee, which has become such a hub for a lot of it. And I don't have patience for it. To me, I want to create authentic, realistic stories that bring people to ask life's biggest questions. And sometimes that's through the lens of a faith-based character. Sometimes it's through the lens of an atheist. And I will juggle that authenticity as much as possible.
And even, from a proselytizing point of view, it almost makes more sense to try to limit it and make it not so on the nose, because that, of course, would cause people to get their defenses up. You'd want to project it in a way which is as minimal as possible, but as playing as integral role in the film as possible, which I think it does. It is kind of the moral of the story ultimately, but it doesn't have to be there every step of the way, right? It just has to be there when it matters most. I would encourage people to go and check it out. As a prepper, as a person who's watched the channel for over the years, this is going to get you thinking about stuff. And I think if a movie does that, then it's a winner in my mind. This is a thinker, and it's going to, I think, get people to think about a lot of things that maybe they really haven't considered. And, that there's a great value in that.
Yeah, and I think so often I don't want to live in fear, Nate. Like so much of what I've been taught throughout my life is, hey, don't live in fear, take risks. But to me, being prepared allows me to not live in fear. Being prepared for the worst actually takes that away in so many ways. And people will make fun of preppers all the time, like, oh, you're just living in fear. You're always worried about the worst thing that's ever going to happen. No, but I'm going to be prepared if it does happen. And that way I don't have to be in fear. And those guys are going to be knocking on our doors so quickly. And tucking their tails and apologizing for the things that they've said over the years. I have no doubt on that.
Well, when you have insurance, there's a new kind of confidence that you can enjoy when you're just living your life. And that's all prepping is. It's insurance. And oftentimes the people who are saying that we're living in fear I think they're projecting their own fears in a lot of ways. And typically those people can be very dangerous when it happens because that mentality carries over and it actually inverts and it becomes panic. You don't want to have your motivations to prepare at the whim of current events. Oh, there's a war starting. Oh, there's a pandemic. It should be, there has to be some intrinsic underlying motivation that is always there that values self-preservation. And maybe that is something which is maybe part of the reason why so many of my viewers are religious, is because there's something about that where it's correlated with that mentality of, just taking responsibility for oneself and understanding that the world that we've created, this artifice of man, is very fragile and, it could definitely come undone at any point. Let's hope it doesn't. And like you, I don't live in fear at all because I know I got all my bases covered. So it's quite the opposite, actually. But I want to thank you for coming out today, man. And where can people find out? Okay, for one, if people don't have it showing at a movie theater, where can they watch this?
So right now, sadly, the only way to see it is at a movie theater, at least for the next few weeks. And then after that, it will be available at angelstudios.com. They have an app that's available on pretty much Apple TV, Samsung TV, any kind of TV streamer platform that you have. You can download the Angel Studios app. You can watch the series on there, and hopefully soon the movie as well.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot for coming out. I do appreciate it, and I hope that you guys can keep doing this for a few more seasons.
That's the plan, man. Yeah, thank you for having me on here to talk about it, because hopefully that will help us keep it going for a few more seasons.
Let's hope so. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Ben. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Nate.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.